At the end of the school year, I always get a few extra cold calls from salesmen trying to take advantage of the new upcoming school year. I get calls about textbooks, technology, even temporary mobile buildings. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Jacob, our rep at a big technology company, asking if we needed anything for the coming year. And now, I didn't mind this call too much because we use this company a lot, and Jacob has always been really helpful, but I knew right away there wasn't anything we needed. So we had a few pleasantries, and Jacob asked what we needed. I told him we were in good shape, and then Jacob asked me if he could ask a question. It seemed a little odd for a sales call, but I said, okay. From the other end, Jacob said, "Aren't you a deacon?" "Yes," I said. Jacob then spent the next 10 minutes asking me questions about being a deacon, far longer than he asked me anything about business. What do deacons do? Did I enjoy it? What was my formation like? Is it like that in every diocese? Did I think about being a priest ever? He told me he was raised as a Catholic but had fallen away and hadn't been to Mass in a while until recently. He was trying to resume his practice of the faith, and he had recently gone to Easter Mass for the first time in many years. I encouraged him and congratulated him and told him that I was happy to talk about it anytime. And then I took his cue to be bold, and I asked him something out of the ordinary for a business call. I asked if we could pray together before we got off the phone. And so he, of course, said that we could. And so I prayed for him, prayed for his faith journey. I prayed for our church leaders that we would lead well. And we said goodbye, and that was that. As I read the opening lines of today's gospel, I was reminded of this moment with Jacob. At the sight of the crowds, Jesus' heart was moved with pity for them because they were troubled and abandoned, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest." Every word of this is speaking to us today, but to me a key word is in that last line. Jesus is not looking for executives for his harvest. He is not looking for people to oversee the management of his field. He is looking for laborers to go in the field, to do the work, to get their hands dirty. And the laborers he's talking to are all of us. There's a growing focus on evangelization in the Catholic Church in the United States, and it does not look the way you might expect. It's not holding signs on street corners or knocking on doors. The first step in the new evangelization is directly related to this gospel today, and it is this. Most people who come into the Catholic Church do not come because they have heard great preaching. They do not come because they have read a great theology book. The people who come to the Catholic Church come because they meet someone who is Catholic and they trust them. That's it. People come if the laborers in the vineyard are trustworthy. So many people look at the church from the outside and see a weird ancient culture that they think has no relevance today. When someone outside the church has a friend who they believe to be a normal and reasonable person, and then they find out that normal, reasonable person is Catholic, it opens doors to the church that would otherwise be closed, that would otherwise never lead to that person setting foot in this building. Archbishop Fulton Sheen famously said, "There are not over 100 people in the United States who hate the Catholic Church. There are millions, however, who hate what they wrongly believe to be the Catholic Church." This includes countless people who would call themselves Catholic if you asked them, but have lost touch. For someone who fits this description, the most likely doorway for them to know the church better is you. The first book that I had to read in my diaconate formation was not the Catechism. It was a book titled Forming Intentional Disciples by Sherry Weddell. Weddell and others involved in evangelization have consistently identified what they call 5 thresholds of growth into the church. And the first is simply called trust. Jesus, of course, knew this. That is why he called a bunch of normal, everyday people to begin spreading his church. His apostles were not introduced as Peter, who holds a master's degree in theology from the University of Jerusalem. He was Peter, the fisherman, and John and his brother James, Zebedee's sons, normal, everyday people. From these 12 simple men, there are now over 2 billion people who call themselves Christian in the world. But that part didn't happen overnight either. Jesus didn't send Peter to the United States or Andrew to Australia. Today we heard him tell all 12, do not go to pagan territory or to the Samaritan towns. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus' call for us today is not to drop everything and go on forward mission. Jesus calls us to lead normal lives of faith and be witnesses to the lost sheep who are right here with us. He calls us to be a trustworthy witness of the church to Jacob from the technology company, to Joe down the hall who was raised Catholic but stopped going to Mass in college and never went back, to Susan across the street who had a bad experience with a priest a few years ago. You probably already have enough of a relationship with people with a similar background that you already have that trust. So then, what can you do to take that trust and let them know you take your faith seriously? I want to say on the record, the answer is not go knock on their door and hand them a catechism. It's the little things. My connection with Jacob wasn't because of some great homily that I gave. It happened because a year ago, I took 10 seconds and I added the word Deacon to my email signature. For Susan across the street, maybe a statue of Mary in your flower garden opens a door that wasn't there before. At work, maybe you can't put a statue of Mary on your desk, but you can probably have a wedding photo, and maybe you've got one that has a priest and a church in the background. That says something about what's important to you. Or something as simple as bowing your head in the break room before you eat your lunch, or even if you want to go all the way, make the sign of the cross. It is also true that some of us sitting here today may be wondering why you are here. You may be struggling to trust the church and its priests and me. If that's you, thank you for being here today. And maybe you can look around and see someone who maybe seems like someone you can trust and whose example might encourage you to be here again next week. In Sherry Waddell's book, she ends the section on trust with a quote from a recent convert to the faith that sums up this idea perfectly. His name is Paul Wallace. He's no one famous, but he says, I am not a Christian because it makes sense or because someone sat down and diagrammed it for me. I am a Christian because I have been loved deeply and unconditionally by Christians. Some of them troubled me with hard questions, but all of them loved me when I did not love them. This is why Jesus spends so much time talking about sheep and laborers and fishermen and mustard seeds. Our theological prowess is going to lead far fewer to deeper faith than our love of our neighbor. God's love for us is boundless, and one of the greatest ways that we can ever experience that love is through each other. The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. Today, the master of the harvest asks you to be a laborer for his harvest. He asks you, can you be the love of God for others?